Hello there, kia ora. No doubt you heard the news that over the weekend an assassination attempt was undertaken against former president and Republican nominee for this year's election in the States, Donald Trump. What we saw afterwards was really textbook in terms of how communication creates an information vacuum in the 21st century. You see, an information vacuum is what happens when you have more questions than answers. So we, as humans, basically kick in human nature and start filling in the gaps ourselves. And it leads to a whole bunch of disinformation and misinformation. It's actually really common when you've got a large amount of information being thrown at people and a whole bunch of questions that nobody has answers to, but it's all unraveling pretty damn quickly. So it's all pretty shocking. And it's actually a pretty recent kind of phenomenon when it comes to our media. For example, if you take the assassination of Lincoln back in 1865, that took 12 days for that news to reach Europe. And by that time, there'd been investigations, everybody knew what the outcome was, and they had a lot more information to be able to tell people. Even then, the spread of news over the rest of continental USA was much slower than what we saw in 1963 with Kennedy. With Kennedy, it took 15 minutes for news of the shots to be fired to reach nationwide news, and then it took another hour for the news to be released that Kennedy had died. With this attack on the weekend on Donald Trump, information was out almost instantly within minutes. And that means that there were a lot of gaps in terms of what our knowledge was of what happened. All that was known at the time of the attack was that there were some pops or bangs, depending on which media outlet you listen to. Trump fell to the floor and then he got up and it looked like his ear was bleeding. That was pretty much it. Nobody knew anything else at the time, and so gaps started to be filled in. When this kind of event happens, it is really important to remember that our mainstream media has a role in being able to ascertain the facts, but they make mistakes. Everybody does, even those who are right there when it happens, because it's all based on a whole bunch of stuff happening really super fast that nobody has all the information on. So, mainstream media will make mistakes in that initial outbreak of whatever it is that's going on in these kind of big events. But it doesn't mean that you should trust everybody with what they say. Anonymous sources, for example, could mean just about anybody. And you shouldn't really trust stories that cite other news outlets because they're all grappling for the same kind of information. And basically, sharing information between them can be really problematic. There's also some really interesting language that you can pick up on, like we're getting reports of, or we're seeking confirmation, or we've learned that da da da. Da. Those kind of story headliners and information pieces are really fascinating to keep people gripped to their TV screens, but don't necessarily have the backing of being fact checked or being qualified by police sources, for example, or law enforcement, or everybody who was on the ground at the time. So it's really possible for disinformation to take root and start to spread really quickly. The ways around this is to look at, well, news outlets that were actually there is a really good place to start versus ones that are doing the broadcast from somewhere far away. Comparing multiple news sources is also a really important way of being able to check whether or not the information you're getting is accurate, as long as they're not, quoting each other at the time that they do that. Don't forget as well that some big news stories bring out people who are willing to fake stories and fake information to get on TV. Same with photoshoppers, really common these days. And you should also be really aware of reflexive social media output. People are like, well, this is what my reckons are. The fact of the matter is we don't know all the details, and we're not going to know all the details for quite some time, but we as humans want to interpret what's going on in front of us and be able to fill in the gaps. We don't like not knowing. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's an assassination attempt against a US politician, or an outbreak of a deadly virus around the world, or any other numbers of big news stories that leave us with this information vacuum. We as humans are always going to rush to fill things in, and we as humans should always remember that we don't have the full picture in front of us all the time, and maybe we should just take a step back and let things develop so we can find out the full truth in the fullness of time.